everyone. So in the previous video, we had mentioned wanting to go over more stuff about the self-diagnosis discourse. And shortly after I had mentioned that on stream, I was actually reached out to by one of my friends who is also a mental health professional who said they were really frustrated with it. Apparently, this is going on in a lot of different places, and so we thought we would discuss it here. So I want to introduce one of my friends. On our server, they go by Hanging Wednesday, and they are a mental health professional very similar to myself. Wednesday, go ahead and introduce yourself. Say hi to everybody.
Hi, I'm Wednesday. Nice to talk to all of you.
And so I guess where to start, like I think you saw the stream where we talked about this. What are your pronouns, by the way, that the chat would like to know?
Either he, him, or they, them.
Okay, he, they, everyone. So when you contacted me, would it be a fair approximation to say that the self-diagnosis discourse upset you?
Yeah, so I was watching the Hippy Dippy Rumble, and I'd seen a little bit of stuff before that, but the Hippy Dippy Rumble was especially on Dylan Byrne's channel, for anyone who's not familiar. It's this big panel show that he was doing, and it was deeply frustrating.
Okay, so what I haven't watched it yet. I've been kind of honestly avoiding it because I heard there was a bit of a gang up on Demon Mama, and I found myself really frustrated. So I guess what was your experience of that panel?
So I mean, it was a weird topic, I think, for Dylan to pick because it was so close to something that Demon Mama had just talked about and that's been reviewed by Destiny, and it was kind of, it felt like a topic to kind of come at Demon Mama about, I guess, or maybe it's just because it was popular at that point, but it was very strange to me. And she brought it up and she was talking about self-diagnosis. And yeah, the rest of the panel was pushing back really hard on it. And I'm really split on it because, and I watched your video about this earlier. You actually said a lot of what I had really wanted to kind of say about the differentiating between self-diagnosis and diagnosis from a professional. But it really felt like the entire panel discussion could have been addressed differently had anyone just been like, okay, can we refer to this as self-assessment? You need a certain level of self-awareness to be able to discuss with your provider symptoms and things that you notice going on to help them come to a better diagnosis for you.
Got it. So the idea being is that this is where I came down to as well, and you mentioned that, is that one of the problems with that discourse is that it's using language that is sort of dual meaning, right? So the problem is there's the colloquial definition of diagnosis, which is to just sort of assess something and make it so. And then there's also diagnosis in the sense of formal diagnosis. That is if you and I are working with a client and let's say we do our intake paperwork and we have to tell insurance, they have this as far as we can tell. That is us diagnosing someone formally. But that's very different than someone just saying, these are the things I'm noticing about myself. And it sounds like this panel, what happened was they got kind of hyper-focused on the notion of they thought that she was conflating self-assessment, to use your language, with diagnosis in the clinical sense.
Yeah, and I think that, they all went to the, and this might be pejorative, so I apologize in advance if it is, but, they all went to the internet and looked up the word diagnosis, and they were like, oh, this is a formal thing. And it is. If you look that definition up, it's going to refer to the specific process that we are trained in and have a legal ability to do, right? Because there are plenty, that is a difference, and diagnosis is a duty, I would say, or role that we have that is legally there. And if it wasn't legally there, we wouldn't be able to do our jobs. So they went and they saw, oh, that she's talking about self-diagnosis. And I think another point in this, and sorry if I'm being long-winded.
You're fine.
But the other thing here is, I think that something that came up is that many of those panelists have a very different experience of working with medical providers than, say, Demon Mama does, or people of other identities, right? You had a bunch of people who, if they go to their doctor and they tell them something, they're more likely to be believed, and they're more likely to be seen as giving proper information. Whereas Demon Mama, and I hear this a lot, especially from Black identified people of color and women, is that they don't get the treatment that they need because they're not believed.
Yeah.
And so I think they have a different relationship with providers as well.
No, and I think she made that comment on a discussion with a friend of hers after the Royal Rumble. And I think that's the problem is that when you're coming from this like colorblind notion of, I suppose, like this colorblind notion of diagnoses and things like that, that's fine. But the problem is in reality, where I think we're living, the problem is that there are very real biases about how people experience this stuff.
And that people with different identities have to advocate for themselves in different ways and much more actively than, say, somebody who meets a lot of the majority identifiers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so it's like, we've seen this with, like, for example, Black women, where they will be underbelieved or underrepresented in a lot of ways. We've seen this with like a lot of different groups, and obviously trans women being one of the biggest ones is a huge issue, because I hear that from clients all the time, specifically that like there is a very real way in which with trans people, you could easily go into a situation where you could have a therapist like me who's like immediately willing to support you and immediately willing to like engage. And you also could go into a situation where you suddenly have a therapist who wants to, gaslight you or gatekeep you in some particular way. And that's really fucking hard.
Yeah, and so I think they were coming at it from very different angles and very different experiences. And I know that one of the things that Destiny in particular had kind of really latched on to was some comment that maybe Demon Mama had made during her stream that had insinuated perhaps, or he had just interpreted that, or they had just interpreted that, self-diagnosis was more important. And I think it's in light of that, in that kind of self-advocacy point, that she may have said something along those lines of how important self-diagnosis is, because sometimes people are walking into medical providers of any sort and having to really be like, no, this is what's going on for me. And so I think having that as a factor that wasn't discussed or not acknowledged during that is kind of what led to that entire thing being really clusterfuck.
Well, it sounds like it was an absolute gross show of like privilege. I mean, like, I hate to throw that term around, but it really is. I mean, you're having Destiny, a non-binary person who uses he, him pronouns and has no desire to like microdose or do any type of transitioning, nor should they, or he. But the fact of the matter is that if Destiny walks into a doctor, by definition, that doctor's probably going to, based on presentation and based on Destiny appearing as a white guy, going to probably take his shit really seriously and listen to him. But if Destiny were, say, what his name suggests, which would be a Black woman, the fact of the matter is that, like, that would be a very different experience.
Yeah, and I don't want to be too uncharitable with Destiny. I'm not a huge fan of his, but he was probably much more reasonable in that discussion than I have seen him in anything else regarding Demon Mama. And it wasn't just him, right? Like, it was a number of members on that panel. And like it was a weird thing that happened with that entire discussion too, where, well, I'm not going to get into that unless you want that to be a topic. So let's
just bring it up, because if it's relevant, if it feels like it has some relevancy, please bring it up.
Okay, so I mean, during that entire thing, it was a timed thing, and each round was like 15 minutes or so, and then a topic would be introduced or a round would be started, and then often Demon Mama would be the first person to talk, and she tends to be very verbose, and so she would, spend 3 to 5 minutes of that time. She would say things that then people would want to react to, and she wouldn't really get a chance to respond after that because she'd already had ample time in the round. But it kind of also had a bad look to it because she didn't get to engage with any of the stuff that people were bringing to her, and then people would make snarky comments about it, and it was just kind of a, once again, clusterfuck is the word that comes to mind.
Well, and what it shows is like a way in which, like, it sounds like she was sort of the person on the chopping block. If she's the one that always has to go first, then by definition, she has to be the one who is, for lack of a better term, everybody else is responding to her, right? And so that's a problem, because in a lot of ways, what that essentially comes down to is like she has to be the one who is putting forth the idea, and the problem with that is that then she can be jumped on or attacked or pushed on, and it doesn't sound like she really got the opportunity to really, like, in any meaningful way actually respond.
And I want to be clear too, I don't think she had to go first in all the things, but again, she would have thoughts on the topic, and so, like, they weren't like, hey, you go first. It's that she was jumping in there. But then what that ended up happening is creating that situation where everybody's reacting to her.
Got it. Okay.
And when there's 8 other people, and now there's only, anywhere from 10 to 11 minutes for everyone else to get their piece in because of how many people are there. Yeah, I mean, it's really, really no bueno.
Well, and especially because I've seen in other debates, and maybe this is just my observation, but one of the things that I think is really interesting is Demon Mama tends to be very aggressive in debates, and I think for good reason, because there's ways in which I can see her being silenced or in many ways being overspoken. This happens with, what's his name? What is his name? CTR? Whatever that dude's name is.
CTV.
Yeah. CTV, that guy, like, that guy will gish gallop like a motherfucker, especially about trans kids or any Republican talking point. And I've seen her kind of have to bully in and push her way in to be able to speak up and get her word in. And I wonder in some cases if that didn't work as like a neg against her, because essentially what happened is it sounds like she pushed forward, wanted to get her idea out first. And because she kind of established the set, and on top of it was, fairly long-winded, bringing up multiple points, it kind of gave them all the ability to kind of focus and attack her rather than engage with each other.
Yes. And also some folks in chat have actually had some good things to say, so I wanted to put attention over there too. Yeah,
could have been worse. At least Rob Neer wasn't on panel. Fair. This sounds like the same kind of thing Destiny did on one panel where he jumped in, challenged Voss over conspiracy, election of George Bush, and the moment it started the entire hour, he spent the next 2 hours tearing it. Yeah, the discussion where Vosh called all conservatives fascist, which is demonstrably showable. And Destiny basically started the charge of everyone going, that's just you being hyperbolic. Not all conservatives are fascists. It's like, well, Echo would disagree. But we talked about this before. Destiny has a really bad habit of just panel sniping. That whole discussion about gender, if you go back and find that whole discussion, it's literally, and it's really weird, but it's like a whole shit ton of trans people, Prime Case, I think that's his name, Prime Case, and Vosh. And then all of a sudden, Destiny just swoops in. And I don't think that that's what happened here, but I do think there's a way that, like, Destiny can kind of push a conversation in a particular direction. It sounds like he was fairly restrained in this one. But yeah, it is a really weird series of interactions. And I think the problem is it sounds like they overall just missed her fucking point.
Oh yeah, I would definitely say they were missing the point. Um, and I think some of it was not wanting to, and also the nature of the show is to um, get one over on each other, especially in short format as that was.
Hmm.
So I don't think that helped. But yeah, as Tim had said, the entire discussion was kind of destroyed by that.
Yeah, and the problem is that like if I look at it, and this is the problem, is no one else to my knowledge on that panel is a clinician. So like nobody actually asked us, but Demon Mama specifically, and I know this because I've interacted with a few of these people, did talk to people who are clinicians. Like other than the language issue, calling it self-diagnosis, and even that's questionable whether that matters or not. It's not like she's saying this is a formal medical diagnosis, right? By definition, like there's just no problem with this. In fact, the only difference would be as a simple, like you said, reframing of just self-assessment. If I go through, like, it's not like you can't find the DSM-5 online. You go online, you've been paying attention to yourself for a while, you've been going through your journals, going through stuff, and so noticing a pattern. Spoiler alert, like you may come to something, and when you bring it to your therapist or your doctor, that might be something to bring up. A good example of this would be and I think I remember telling this to you, is a couple years back, I had been listening to Jim Sterling's podcast, Podquisition, and I had expressed to you, this is before I came out, that I had a fear that I might have bipolar because there was a lot of things that Jim was sharing on Podquisition that felt very familiar. Well, I went to go work with my therapist, and what, did I have bipolar? No, that wasn't what we came to. What we came to was borderline, which I've been very public about. But the fact is, even just thinking that and kind of referencing it and kind of exploring it led to growth. It led to some kind of awareness or improvement. So even if the person's necessarily wrong, like I was in my case, and I don't even know if I necessarily say wrong, I would just say that borderline's a better fit, there's real possibility that can be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important for people to be able to check into that and then ask questions. I have clients come to me all the time, and they'll say, "Oh, well, I think I have this," or somebody said, it was like this, and to be able to go through that with them and to use that as a lead in and go, okay, so from what I've seen, this may match, or this is why I don't think that that's accurate, or hey, let's go through the criteria and see which ones do fit for you. This happens most of all with borderline, bipolar, and those are the big ones. Those are the big ones that I'm usually referencing with folks. But using that as a lead-in is useful, but also so that you can have that discussion with your professional, and they can tell you, well, no, this is why I don't see it that way, or this might be another factor that makes me think of this, or this could even be related to medical things you have going on.
Absolutely.
Right? So I think it's a really good thing to be able to the resources that we do online and to have some form of self-assessment. And as a colloquial term, self-diagnosis is fine. I think when you when you start to have that discussion on the internet in a panel, that's where it falls to shit, because everybody then does a little bit of research, says, "Oh, you're not supposed to diagnose," and then that becomes the major focus instead of just, hey, lots of people do this. They come in and they talk about their symptoms with their provider, and some people have to advocate for themselves more than that because of gatekeeping, because of plenty of different things. I mean, it can even just be the skill set of your provider, right? Like some therapists and some mental health providers know more and are more focused on certain disorders, and so they'll see them before they would see something else necessarily.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And this is where you get into the interaction of things. Is sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you have to sit down with the DSM-5 and go through it with a client to figure out what's going on. I remember I had a person in our Discord who talked about, like, they had a difficulty where, because there are certain behaviors that can happen with moderate autism, that they were getting confused for a bunch of other disorders. Like sometimes going through the actual like things not only will help the person understand whether this is what's actually going on, it's also really good for us because going through them, like the idea that any one of us, any mental health professional can remember everything in the DSM-5 is fucking ludicrous. There are some disorders in there you will never, unless you're in a very rare case, going to come across. This has actually been the experience we've seen with Zena dealing with PMDD. There are some disorders that unless you happen to have someone like that walk into your office, that's really hard.
Yeah, no, PMDD is one that we were noticing issues around my period already, and we didn't have a word for it. We didn't really know what was going on. And it took a while to see that pattern going on because this wasn't a lot of people, you know, we'll talk about this, some of that's been going on for, you know, most of their life dealing with periods, but PMDD is premenstrual dysphoria disorder, by the way. But in my case, it started a few years ago. This isn't that old for me, so we really didn't know what was going on. And it wasn't until one of Jess's friends was like, yeah, hey, this is the thing that I deal with. And we're like, oh, so we looked into it, you know, and we brought that to my doctor. My doctor was like, yeah, that works. Yeah, that's probably what's going on. That was about that. You know, but we needed to get enough language and enough learning to figure it out. And PMDD is still one that, like, I rarely find doctors that actually know about it first. I think the only one that did know about it first, before I told them, was my dermatologist. And well, that's not quite the same doctor. You know, that's not quite the same as my gynecologist, okay? So, yeah, that one's been kind of a messy one. But I think the thing that I know here, though, is, like, I know, like, that if somebody walked into, like, the office and told, you know, either of you, like, hey, and they use self-diagnosis, right? Like, if they said that word to you, I'm sure that both of you guys could wade through that and be like, okay, let's look at that. Let's talk about this. Let me go ask some questions about that and understand what this person's saying, right? And so, like, getting hung up on, like, self-diagnosis, yes, there are better words, but I have a hard time, like, having that particular thing be my stuck point here, right? Like, there's so many other things that we could be talking about that single word in the colloquial usage is not the worst thing in the world to me.
Yeah.
You know, and I've been seeing a lot of the community reacting to that. Wait, what does this mean? What does this do? There's a lot of nervousness and anxiousness because Destiny's making a huge deal out of it. So.
Yeah, and I think it was a mixture of a number of people having negative relationships and past experiences with Demon Mama, them doing a quick internet search for diagnosis, and getting hung up on the more official terminology, and a little bit of and a sprinkle of bad faith in there. Tiamat had said up in the chat. Sorry, I'm watching the chat. I don't know if I should be doing that.
That's fine. You're allowed.
Tiamat had said, you know, it's like people who are used to being believed arguing with someone who's not used to being believed about their experiences.
Yeah.
And yes.
Absolutely.
And then a couple of people have made this point, and I wanted to make sure that I mentioned it. So Ash mentioned some people, for one reason or another, can't access a counselor also. True. And so sometimes they're limited to only what they are able to access, right? And so self-diagnosis might be the only thing they have access to in those times.
Mm-hmm.
We absolutely see that PMDD folks will wait forever to find a doctor or to find people that can actually, like, know about this. Yeah. And I know a lot of other disorders are the same way. So.
Yeah, and like we talked about with trans folks, like, one of the big issues is like gender dysphoria. Depending on the counselor you go to, and I've talked to you before about some of my misgivings of going to certain trainings, like, if you're a person that's like a closeted trans woman and you go to certain, like, providers, like, they're just not going to know what the fuck they're on about. And their natural inclination for, I guess, some out of misgiving fear about wanting bad things to happen to you, or not wanting bad things to happen to you, are going to try to talk them out of it. I've heard numerous clients make the stories about their therapist trying to talk them out of being trans instead of just exploring it with them and seeing if it's accurate. It's mind-boggling how much. It's odd because we, like, simultaneously do this thing where we both overemphasize expertise in the ways that I think suck, where it's sort of like this tries to be a thought terminating cliche, and we underutilize it when it comes to like actual arguments or discussions. So like the problem is that like just because a therapist says that you aren't trans, seek a second opinion. Like we've made that very clear on this channel. Like if you feel like that really isn't accurate for you, go find someone else who's going to hear you out and listen. And if not, you may just have to go online and find resources. One of the things I found really helpful, is just a side note to people, is the borderline community. There's people out there on borderline forums. Yeah, some of them probably aren't the greatest, but there's a lot of people on there that have a lot of good resources and are really caring. And hell, one of the Google Doc tests that I've used with clients before, the personality disorders test for the DSM-5, or what's called the PID, I got from one of those. It was really effective and works just like the normal test. It's just not handwritten. That's something really fucking great, like when people are sharing resources like that. So sometimes, yeah, you have to dig into those communities and see. That may be all you have.
Yeah, very, very true. And then Emily in YouTube chat had mentioned access of trained people who meet your needs is massive. Yes. And so it really also depends on the areas that you're in, right? Like here in the area that we're at, there's a few fairly big practices who specialize and work with LGBTQ folks, and so here there's a lot of resources for that. But if you go closer to where, maybe Jess lives or someone else, maybe there's not. And so at that point, you kind of have to find people who are going to be willing to hear you.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And part of the problem is like it absolutely is a locational thing. Like if you're a trans person or you're a person dealing with significant mental illness, like that's gonna like there are areas in this country where if you go there, you're gonna suck. Anderson Cooper, just so you know, our guest is Hanging Wednesday. His pronouns are he, they. My pronouns are she, they. That my partners are they or a. So, I will put those in chat for you just so you're aware. But yeah, I think that one of the things is like, imagine you're a trans kid in fucking Texas right now.
Right? Well, I think one of the things to watch out for too with this is that it seems like there is almost a fear to look up resources for or look up like help for like a disorder or a thing that you're not sure if you have for sure. Like if you're like, hey, I don't know if I have PMDD or I don't know if I have ADHD. And I think there's almost a hesitancy to kind of get into some of those groups and kind of be able to access, talking to people or access more resources if you don't already have a word. And I think that's sometimes where the self-diagnosis stuff come in. I'll notice it's PMDD where like they kind of wish to be like, okay, like I'm part of this. I'm supposed to be here. I'm not hurting anybody's feelings by being here, right? And that's where I get some of the weirdness, I think, in there.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a tough one for people too.
And then we had to yeet Anderson Cooper into the sun YouTube chat. Who's that?
Yeah, no, it's sad. Anderson Cooper apparently came in and was being a transphobic troll and said that their pronouns were Honda Civic. So, that's the level of discourse I expect from transphobes. Utter and complete stupidity.
I like that I look away from the screen for like 5 seconds and just...
Oh yeah, no, they fly in here pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Emily, you mentioned please no functional levels for autism.
I can speak to this a little bit. I can explain what she's talking about.
Yeah, please.
So functional levels in autism we'll talk about people with autism and say they have a certain like age level of function, right? They function at an 8-year-old level. And that's really dismissive, right? Because they're not 8 years old unless they are 8 years old. If they're 20 years old, it's not that they have an 8-year-old's function level. It's be more explicit and direct to the point of what the capabilities are, is my understanding of it. And Emily, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong in that.
Yeah, so when I use moderate, I'm not referring to that definition. In fact, I actually wasn't even aware of that definition. Maybe that's just because it's an older one used. Emily said in chat that it's just not current. When I say moderate, I'm referring to there does appear to be a spectrum of function within autistic individuals. And there are autistic individuals I've interacted with who are, like when I was in case management, who were directly incapable of, without reminders, like hygiene issues or like doing certain household tasks, things like that. That's not to in any way project on their age. I'm talking explicitly about what I would consider function in the abstract sense. So that's what I'm referring to there. I'm not saying anyone's of a particular age. I think that's really weirdly ungainly and stupid language. Yeah.
There is also something about high functioning versus low functioning that I think she was referring to, not just the age labels. So I was wrong.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I guess the one thing I would ask the autistic individuals in chat, and this is something you guys can correct me on because I don't work with that many autistic clients, despite having an autistic kid, but I'm still learning this stuff. They only got their diagnosis, about a year ago.
Yeah.
What do you prefer to describe that phenomenon? Are we just too, like, what are you doing? I don't want to strawman you and say we just ignore it, but how do you describe that? Do you go into the specific ways of, like, the dysfunction itself? Because there's a tendency in neurodiverse communities to, at the extreme ends, and this might be a straw man, but I have seen it, and that is with ADHD and autism to sort of act as though these things aren't things that actually really make people struggle sometimes. And the reality is that, in all honesty, they really do. ADHD, as much as I think it is perfectly natural and normal for someone's mind to function that way, I believe this about myself, there are ways that it actively does hinder and stop me. You like the labels high interference, low interference. You know what? I think that actually is a really good language as well.
And yeah, the only ways I've heard it to address this is to be
Emily,
more concise about maybe some of the struggles that they have.
Sure. Emily in chat, I'm going to say I don't know if I agree with the idea that it's destructive. I'd be willing to talk to you sometime about it and come over to your side as far as understanding it better. But at least in my opinion, like, I think there's a difference between something not being an accurate description or potentially marginally something, and then it's saying it's destructive. That feels like a leap for me. But if you can cite ways that it is destructive or show ways in which it, and what you mean by destructive in this context, I would be willing to look at those. Yeah, please put them in links. I would love to check that out. So yeah, and if one of the mods can copy those links and put them in the links for stream chat, that would be really helpful. So,
anyway, we've kind of gone pretty far afield. Is there anything else we wanted to talk about as far as the self-diagnosis thing and that whole situation?
Yeah, I think I feel pretty solid about it. I mean, I think I know where I stand with this, and I'm pretty much on the same view as you, is that this feels like this is really fixed with a simple language change. And it seems like this was just an opportunity for people who had a predisposition to being aggressive towards Demon Mama, using this as an opportunity to jump on a definitional issue. Organic Fucko in chat, the levels of care model is a new distinction. It's not that new. I did this 5 years ago when I was in CMH. The difference being is with the CMH model, levels of care also describes the level of like services that are given. So that wasn't exclusively used with autistic people. That was used with anyone with severe mental illness. So we're talking schizophrenia, schizoaffective, bipolar, etc. So if you're talking about the levels of care model, the only thing I'll say about the levels of care model is I've seen real abuse with that, especially in my job as a case manager. So I don't know if the language we're using is the same, because if it is, that has issues too. This is my problem with like shooting down languages. All language can be problematic. So I want to understand how something is destructive or what those levels of care are referring to, because some of those levels of care can be bent over and used by, say, insurance companies or community mental health for not wanting to put out more money. I have seen people being misplaced in the levels of care system. So just putting it out there. But yeah, as far as the self-diagnosis stuff, I think it's perfectly reasonable to for people to figure out if something feels right to them and then seek mental health, seek help and see if that's accurate. And sometimes if you can find someone that works with you, I think you're right. Find somebody who is find someone who can work with you eventually, or you might just have to have this be your best guess. And that's okay.
Yeah, and And I wanted to respond to Andy because I hope that I probably mispronounced that. I'm so sorry. Thinking of neurodivergence as folks operating with a series of sliders that boost or attenuate certain stimuli reception is the best footing for talking about it, I've found. And I really like that idea. I would just have to figure out how the way to implement it and how to talk about it that way. But I think as far as a manner of conceptualizing it, I think that is a very good idea.
Yeah, and that very well could be the case. I like that idea in concept. I guess what I'll say is that, and maybe this is my own ignorance, a lot of the times I interact with leftist groups online, there tends to be a thing of talking about neurodivergency as a just a difference, and that's fine as far as trying to reduce stigma and trying to make things less problematic for neurodivergent people. But I want to make sure that we're not using language that obfuscates the actual struggles they have. It's actually one of the reasons I like the channel How to ADHD, is because I think that she does a really good job balancing of being more positive and giving tools while also not stigmatizing and acknowledging the issues of what I would call dysfunction. And I don't mean dysfunction in kind of some negative stigmatizing way. I mean dysfunction in regards of areas where I actually struggle functioning. Reading would be one of those areas. I usually do audiobooks, things like that, because for me, it's very hard to read, right? Like, that's very hard to sit down and read. I will just pass out. So, like, yeah, I'd be willing to take a look at a system like that. But again, like Hanging Wednesday said, I don't know how you conceptualize or talk about that without missing the mark either direction. I don't want to stigmatize anyone, but I also don't want to ignore the suffering people deal with these neurodivergencies. I know there's a tendency to not call them disorder, but to me, disorder just simply means when something is causing enough problems that it's reoccurring. ADHD is a disorder for me because it legitimately creates real problems in my life. That doesn't mean it's bad to have or an issue. But again, the ways it's used in ESE, I don't know what ESE is. You'd have to refer to it, Emily. Yeah. And I realize that there's a lot of stuff around neurodivergency, especially when we talk about Autism Speaks and these horrible things that are done to autistic kids. I'm not arguing for any of that. I'm just making it clear that it seems like there's a language issue here in trying to describe this stuff that people get very sensitive about, and I'm not sure what the best language is for this. So,
the only thing, and as far as to Emily's comment, the only ESC reminds me of something to do with education. And so I could see that being a big issue in education with children and young adults, obviously. But yeah, I'm not familiar with that acronym either.
Yeah, I would have to know what that means. And Emily, if you ever do want to talk, you're welcome to hit me up on the Discord. These meds keeping me from hard clipping, and my brain doesn't produce enough of them. Yeah, like, that's a thing for me, is like, again, I don't think dysfunction is a bad word. Maybe that's me and my training, or just the way that I think about this stuff. But I don't think that comes from this incredibly. Yes, I'm aware you are wait, what are you referring to? Paco, I'm not clear what you're 100% referring to there. Is that what the ESE is? Because isn't that deemed torture? Like, isn't that just torture and not approved by any, like, psychological or psychiatric association?
I would hope so. I really hope that's not electroshock. Oof.
Well, it's not electroshock. Like, it's because it's ESE, so it wouldn't be electroshock therapy and it wouldn't be electroconvulsive therapy. I think they're referring to the, like, actual, like, taser one. So I don't know. I don't know what they're referring to. You know this one, Tiamat? Thank you. I would like this clarified to me. No, I know it's a big thing, but I don't know how it's related to this conversation. I feel like people are jumping to conclusions or bringing up things that aren't related to my argument. I'm not saying that autistic people don't get abused and that there are ways that we treat them in society, or at least in the cracks, that really, really fucking suck. That I've never made that claim. So.
Well, and this sounds like it would be a topic for even another segment or stream.
I agree.
One that deserves that.
Yeah, sounds good. But it feels like the self-diagnosis part of this is at least to some degree pretty well understood. I think as far as our chat goes and as far as our community, I don't really have a problem with that language. But if we have to differentiate it, I think, oh, the small shock bracelets. Oh, okay. Wasn't that also used as a way to control outbursts? I'm not saying that's good. I'm saying that's fucking awful. No, you should not use anything like that on humans, anyone really.
That's, yeah, about that.
Yeah, are those links in the Discord, Emily, or are they on? I'm not seeing them in the YouTube, so I'm assuming they're on the Discord. But anyway, so I think we're on the same mind as far as the self-diagnosis part of this, and I do think that, but
yeah, I think they could have just gone, okay, what's your definition of that? Okay, we're really talking about the same thing, because that was the thing. They all really kind of agreed that self-assessment and self-awareness are important factors, and just put that topic to bed. But they didn't. I think probably because of personal issues and historical contexts.
Well, and if you're supposed to be in a debate, you're supposed to be debating, which I'm not really sure how you debate this. Right? Like, is there really like trying to oppose sides in different debates, right? Like, we're more having a discussion here. Like, that's a weird question for a debate. So,
well, and that might just be something with that format too, is just because, it is supposed to be conflict oriented. And so to come to understanding, to figure out, oh, we're just saying the same thing, let's move on. This doesn't serve. I think they did like 3 rounds on that. So like 45 minutes. And it was like, but why though?
Yeah, holy crap.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Anyway, I should get out of here because I need to eat dinner. So
yeah, you be well. Thank you so much for coming on. Everyone, hypers in chat for hanging Wednesday.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, it really means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah. Aw, lots of hypers.
Yes.
Farming drama, Minerva said, yeah.
Awesome. Well, Wednesday, thank you so much for being here. Love you as always. And yeah, I'll talk to you soon.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. You can also ring the bell if you want to be notified of our videos. If you want to help the channel, you can donate at streamlabs.com/transgirltherapist/tip. You also can become a patron at patreon.com/transgirltherapist. For as low as $3, you can support our channel. Thanks for watching.